Hello, everyone. I am Dan Taylor, Director of Communications for the Association of the United States Navy. And welcome to the latest in our live Navy Now webinar series. Today's topic is going to be transitioning from military to civilian life. And we have an outstanding panel. I'm going to go ahead and read a truncated version of each of their bios, so you can find the full version on our website, AUSN.org. I'll start with David Vardeman. He is AUSN board member and board member of Warriors Ethos. He's also the department head for the DC area for not-for-profit and global business development at Capital Bank in Washington, DC. We also have Colonel Adam Rocke, retired U.S. Army. He is the managing director of Institute Serves, an independent nonprofit organization that offers training and employment assistance to veterans specializing in IT. And we have Frank Larkin, who is a former Navy SEAL and served as the 40th Sergeant at Arms of the United States Senate. He serves on the board of directors of NS2 Serves. Thank you all, gentlemen, for being here. And I guess we'll just go ahead and get started and talk generally about the challenges facing when it comes to military and transitioning to a civilian life. And Frank, go ahead and get started with us on that.
Dan, thanks for having us in. I do a lot of work with these gentlemen, to my right. Bottom line up front for your viewers, for those tuning in, is trying to get folks to pay attention to this transition phase is critically important. As we work to help veterans in the post-transition period, we find two different conversations that occur. One that's before they cross the line and separate from service, where they're looking through one lens, and then the reality of once they've crossed out of service, and now they're looking at the reality of being outside the what they've been used to, separated from their tribal connection, so to speak, the units that they have served with, the friends that they've worked with, and then what they encounter in society as they make that transition. So again, our efforts here today are really to try to capture the attention of folks and really get them to dial into what they need to pay attention to in order to make a successful transition.
Right. One thing I was curious about is obviously both of you have had to do your own transitioning from military service, and I wondered what lessons you both have growing Adam and Frank. If you could talk about what lessons you learned from transitioning yourself and how that might be applicable to today.
Hey, why don't I jump on it and Frank just pile on. So like Frank said, thanks Dan very much and the viewers here for having me on today. And I know Frank's Navy, but Army Strong here representing, so proud to say it. Well, here's what I tell people though, Dan, is they've got to treat transition out of the military as their next mission. Just that they treated every mission in their military, any operation they wanted, they treated it seriously. They were well prepared. They got to treat their transition as their next mission and be just as well prepared. It is a process. It is a long process, and the Department of Defense has regulated, beginning at 365 days out and retires about 2 years. So during that process here, there are certain steps that you got to take. And when you treat it as an event, meaning within probably the last 90 days, or some young soldiers start to think about transition 30 days out, then that's when they're unsuccessful. So you could be more successful and take care of yourself and your family if you treat this as a process. But you asked about the challenges. The biggest challenge, I think, for me and any of our transitioning service members, or even potentially some of the military spouses, is figuring out what you want to do next after you get out of the service. No matter what service you were in, you raised your right hand, you served honorably, and you're ready to go out into society and begin a civilian career or whatever your passion in life is. But you've got to figure that out. And that's when people fail. They fail when they don't figure out, one, their goal, what they want to do when they get out, two, potentially with the location that they want to live, and three, their salary expectation, what they think they need to bring in to help sustain the lifestyle. So I think those are three things that all service members wrestle with, and those are the challenges. And if you can kind of figure out maybe two of those before you leave, you're more apt to be successful and land in a good place.
And Dan, I would agree. I came out under a different era. time I came out, there was not a lot of transition support. There is a lot of transition support now. And I can't qualify more what Adam said. You know, you've got to do what really, find something that makes you jump out of bed in the morning. You know, life is about adventure and one experience after another. And if you can find something that kind of scratches that itch, you're going to be a lot happier, and your level of motivation is going to be, you know, very high. But if you're driven solely by how much money you're going to make, there's a high probability you're not going to find that job, and more importantly, be very disappointed on that path, which can lead to other negative experiences.
I want to ask about the Soldier for Life program. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and you know, any resources similar to that across the DoD.
I sure can. Again, it was an honor to be the director of the Soldier for Life program, my last position in the military prior to retiring, and that helped define what I do post-transition as well. So I used my military experience to help me figure out what my passion in life was. But you know, the Soldier for Life program was stood up by the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Ray Odierno, in 2011-2012 timeframe, because we realized that the drawdown was happening. Our service members, especially the Army, which is about 50%, maybe about 47 to 50% of our military, were getting out there post 9/11. You know, service members going back to those communities and looking for employment opportunities and good opportunities. So a vast majority of, you know, those communities wanted to help the veterans, and we needed a place to reach out to. So we created this Soldier for Life organization. We basically are the outreach in employment, education, and wellness for the Army. And I was joking with David, and you all earlier, but I do believe purple. I think it wasn't just about the Army, but our outreach in the Soldier for Life office and what they do today is for all the services. You know, they represent the military. They're ambassadors out there in those communities trying to connect in those three lines of effort there. But the Soldier for Life office is there to help create opportunities for those military members and those family members that are transitioning out. We're not the TAP process. We're an extension of the TAP. We're an enabler to TAP to bring those resources in and to provide those to the TAP centers, the transition assistance centers. Right. So it was an honor to do that. And they're doing a phenomenal job today. And you talked about the other services. The other services, the Marines have a Marine for Life program, which is similar.
Soldier for Life is an Army program.
That's right. Soldier for Life is the Army program. The Marines have a Marine for Life program that was actually stood up prior to the Soldier for Life program. I think we shamelessly took the moniker, you know, Soldier for Life for the Marines, and we built our organization somewhat similar to what they do with some best practices from them. But what they do is a little bit different. They're already out there in the communities with their reserve component service members that are making those connections for them. The Navy right now, if it wasn't for the Navy Safe Harbor Foundation, honestly, they don't necessarily have a program other than what the DoD TAP is. They don't have an outreach office that I'm aware of, unless I am removed from the Army now, but I don't think they do. And the Air Force, I'm told as of this morning, has stood up an Air Force for Life office. So they're at the initial inceptions of creating something similar to the Marine for Life and the Army Soldier for Life program there. And the Coast Guard, obviously a very small force, does care about their transition. I think they're abiding by the DOT TAP.
Yeah. So it seems like these are some pretty recent efforts. I mean, is there a reason why these are sort of coming into play now, or some changing the dynamics there?
Yeah, I think people recognize the values that the service members and their families bring to communities and to organizations. Now, it's no secret that the military unemployment rate is at an all-time low. Don't quote me, I think it's somewhere about 2.7, if I'm not mistaken, by the BLS. So it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal progress so far since we stood this up. You know, one of the things that is the hallmark for all of this was the Veterans Opportunity to Work Act in 2011, which made TAP, Transition Assistance Program, mandatory. When it made it mandatory, now we've made vast improvements along the way, but when it made it mandatory, now those service members had to go through the process, right? Had to go through the initial steps. So that in itself, and the resources and the counseling and the education that was provided during that period of time has really enhanced the veterans' opportunity out in those communities. And that's why our unemployment is so low today. So a lot of progress is being made. I think on the other side, though, out in those communities, those employers recognize the talent. They recognize the talent. They realize that it is good for business. All right, I'm not just hiring a veteran out of pity. The veteran comes with values, discipline, and education, and the skill set, work ethic like no other, and they want more of that. So there are lots of resources out there that are trying to help connect those transitioning service members, those military spouses, with those employers who are veteran friendly, veteran ready to take them into their fold and provide them an opportunity. And we've made a lot of progress.
You touched on TAP, so I guess we should go ahead and,
Sure.
or if you could give a quick overview, just so people can understand, what the Transition Assistance Program within DoD is, and how it can help folks who are transitioning.
Well, sure, absolutely. So TAP is a must, right? It's policy that the service member has to initiate. And now, since the 2019 NDAA, there have been some changes to the TAP, which are heading in the right direction. All right, TAP has always been looking at itself to better itself, and it has along the way, at least what I have observed. And the new NDAA lays the foundation for some even more improvement. But what it does, it lays the foundation for the service member to take ownership of their own transition even more. So, for example, I stated it is mandatory 365 days out to begin that process, right? So now it's a process, not an event. Again, to reiterate, retirees can begin that process going through the TAP 2 years out. But during the process, Department of Labor is involved. They have a one-day workshop on employment to help you prepare for employment. The Veterans Affairs has a one-day workshop to talk about your VA benefits. And then what is offered to you is the potential for an additional 2-day workshop provided by the Department of Labor as well, which a service member now can pick 1 or 2 of those tracks. That track could be employment, it could be education, it could be vocational, or it could be through the Small Business Administration's entrepreneurship program. So now that's giving the service member who's transitioning the opportunity to choose the track they want. Goes more in line with what I talked about, identifying your goals. You identify your goals early, what you want to do at least, these tracks can provide that opportunity for you.
Right. Okay. I wanted to sort of talk a little bit more about the financial side. David, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the common financial challenges that
yeah, and one thing, thank you very much. And one thing that Frank and Adam were talking about is preparation. And there's nothing really more important than being financially prepared for transition. And when you look at individuals, and any individual working, there's 3 critical elements of what makes them happy or what brings self-esteem: financial strength, professionalism, professional strength, and also spiritual. So the financial piece is critical in terms of preparation. 51% of Americans, right now cannot afford a $400 unexpected expense. How do we prepare for that? So that is the individual coming out in transition. One of the number 1 or number 2 causes of divorce is overfinances. So how do you prepare yourself while you're in service for that transition out? And a very high percentage of people that transition out through my work with Warriors Ethos, very high percentage, I don't want to say what it is, but it's very high percentage, are in their first job for 9 months because they're looking for that first job. And so we have to be there for them after they do their 9-month first job experience and help them after that to get them what they really want. So, but how do you prepare better for that transition so you are not one of the individuals that after 9 months are looking for a new job? And I think preparation in terms of savings is critical. And most of the general thoughts are that you need at least 6 months of your expenses in order, when you get out, in order to really have a comfortable job search financially for both yourself or your family. And so this is what I would recommend. And how do you figure that out? I help and do financial literacy from Baltimore to all the way down to Virginia and Tyson's Corner with different people and adults and try to prepare them for that, regardless of age. And we created a budget sheet which will help you. And we're gonna post the budget sheet on the web page and with the blog. And that prepares you and allows you to figure out what are your monthly expenses. And one thing I tell each individual that actually does this is to do it 3 times. Because the first time you do it, you're going to just think, what are my mandatory expenses? What do I have to do to survive? The second one will be, what are my global expenses, including children, including spouse, including everybody everything that you spend in a term of a month? What are those expenses? And then after you do that, you really need to do one more time. Because what are you going to forget about? You might forget about toiletries. You might forget about gas. You might forget about all the things that we spend money on. It's just amazing, all the things that we actually spend money on. So what I would recommend is to go through this budget sheet 3 times and to really come down with what is the figure monthly, if I was unemployed, that I would be comfortable with. It is so important. And then you multiply that by 6, and you do this before you leave the service, and you'll be in very good shape. The reason I'm so passionate about this topic also is when I'm out in the field and I'm talking to Coast Guard individuals, talking to Navy individuals. They've been talking a lot about their 401k and utilizing that and cashing it in when they go out and into the real world or into the civilian population. And when that I don't recommend doing because that money is really designed for retirement and to grow over your entire life and to be utilized when you're a senior citizen. But if you are at the point where that is, at least you would have the data to know what is the minimum amount you need to take out. And so you don't cash it all and you only cash a portion of it. So I would recommend if you are beginning in service or if you're in the early stages, start saving. You know, put that $50 or $100 a month away until you reach your goal. If you're at the very end, you know, think about how much you want to cash out on that before you actually cash the whole thing out. And I'm not familiar with the military in terms of the penalty of taking that out before you're 59 and a half. I know the penalty to me is 35% of that. So if I had $100,000 and I took it out, I'd be taxed $35,000 on that. So it's a lot of money. So I would look into that. I'm not positive with regards to military if you take out the 401k early. So look into that, you know, with a tax advisor. But it is designed for long term, not short term. So that's really what I wanted to share on the finance side and tell you we have resources and you can do it yourself. You can create your own budget sheet out of my budget sheet, whatever you'd like to do, but get prepared because it is a critical element of self-esteem. Right. Being financially prepared and independent will help you dramatically on your transition, whether you're a civilian and you're laid off or whether you're myself in terms of if I were to be laid off, I've already prepared for that. And that's what I would recommend, not only servicemen, but any civilian or person in society. We need to work on that $400 issue in terms of expenses. So that's what I wanted to share.
And hey, David, you bring up a very sage, just providing you sage advice. You know, the finances, money is not a trivial issue here. And that budget sheet, I would submit to you, my friend, is something that should be revisited every year in every household, just to keep you dialed into where you are as far as being able to, you know, support your family, survive in this world, and also be able to look into the future. Dan, if I could just take a second to put some of this into context, that when somebody actually crosses out into the public-private sector, you know, outside military service, the reality is that they're coming from something they know, in large part going to something that they don't know, but they think they know. And the reality is they speak, you know, when you're inside the service and you're inside a particular discipline within the service, you have your own language that you speak. You follow your daily processes, you have a routine that you have been comfortable with depending on how long you've been in. And then you roll out into the public-private sector, and it's a whole different language depending on where you are, different terrain. And if you're not prepared for that, then you know you're going to run into some serious challenges, you know, trying to make that conversion. The finances give you the freedom of maneuver to be able to see what you're interested in and to be able to lift and shift so that you can plug in and integrate into the society. But many of the veterans that we come across that are struggling have lived paycheck to paycheck, have separated from the service. They come out thinking that, you know, hey, I'm a veteran. The world out here is going to be welcoming you with open arms. I'm going to fall into a job. I'm going to get a title, big paycheck. That's not the way it happens. And one of the key barriers that we see here to a lot of these good jobs is an undergraduate degree. So there's a translation issue here between the public-private sector trying to understand the skills and the experiences that you have inside the military and how that actually plugs into what they're doing. And the only real barometer of measurement they have is high school diploma, college degree. And if you don't have that or some other type of certified skill set, then it makes it much harder to crosswalk that, to cross-step that.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of folks who are getting ready to transition are know that and are sort of worried, you know, and they want to know, what can I do? How can I prepare? Who do I reach out to? I don't know what resources are available to me. So, I mean, what would you recommend that they do? Or is there any offices in DOD or the VA that might help them?
Well, I think one is what Adam was covering down on, and so with David, you know, you got to pay attention to these transition programs, and because they're out there. But you know, if you're in a wait and see mode and you expect somebody to deliver to you on a silver platter, you're going to be disadvantaged. You need to proactively go out and explore this and kind of, you know, plan for that mission and mission success. The other thing I would recommend is, you know, talk to some folks that have made the transition. Develop a mentor on the outside or two, and help them guide you through this process based on their experiences. You know, you don't want to, you know, kind of go down that same path that they did, especially if it was a bumpy road, you know, full of pain. You want to avoid that and kind of learn from their experiences. So, you know, try to find somebody that's been kind of, you know, out there and has can offer you some insight and guidance.
So I want to transition to trade, and you know, Adam, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the main challenges of going from a military career to a civilian career and how you translate the skills you obtain during your service.
Well, a couple of things that every service member has the ability to do, and you can do that now from your logging in from your computers, but is to download your joint service transcript. Every service member has it, doesn't matter what service you come from, but that will help identify the skills that you have, the skills that you acquired throughout your military service. The other one is the VMET, verification of military experience and training. So those two documents, the VMET talks about the schooling that you've gone to, right? So that will not only help you when creation of your resume, so now you're identifying skills, some hard skills that you got, right? You can, whoever's helping you build a resume, they'll want that. Couple that with any other education you have, maybe some college that you've gone, maybe an associate's degree, maybe some of you all have a bachelor's degree. Our force is very well educated now. And as Frank alluded to, some of those credentials that hopefully they've gotten one while within the military, but now they have the opportunity to as they're getting ready to transition. Credentials, certifications, or licenses. And those are important to get. Then put those soft skills down there. You know, that's what every company is looking for. Not military talent with those soft skills. I talked about it before, the values, the leadership, the discipline, to name a few, that are not necessarily inherent with those young kids coming out of college right now. So you put that together and you've got a pretty solid resume.
And in terms of putting together a resume, are there resources available for that? And the joint service transcript and the VMET? Is that something that typical companies will understand, or is that something you will need to translate through the resume?
Some companies that I call them veteran ready, that have a veteran in charge of their veterans hiring, whether they're in talent acquisition or the HR or their veteran affairs coordinator or lead for a company, they'll know what the JST and the VMET are. They might ask for them, might not, but at least you have proof and documentation of the skills you acquired, and it'll help you write the language for the resume. Now you talked about the resume writing. You know, throughout the TAP process, during that TAP process, you said there is a class that they help you begin your resume, right? And then I'll also add the LinkedIn. It is a plug for them, but LinkedIn is a tool, it's a professional tool, and all of our service members preparing to transition, especially into professional career, should begin a LinkedIn profile. And LinkedIn has provided, a LinkedIn premium free for those veterans getting ready to transition. So that will also help you. But one of the organizations that has a free resume engine for our service members and our military spouses is HOH, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Hiring Our Heroes Foundation. All right, it has a resumeengine.org. It's a free resume that you can write. It'll take your JST, your VMAT, and the other skills that you put into it, add those soft skills, and it'll produce a really good free resume that you can tailor. You can export that to an individual, a mentor, like Frank talked about, export that to an HR manager, download it for yourself and get somebody to look at it, so on and so forth. And then Career Spark under HOH is another way that our military spouses can get involved. So there are some free resources out there. I would encourage our service members to use the free resources. There are some that you would pay. It's an enormous amount of money, but not everybody has that literal cash available. I'd use the free resources.
David, yeah.
I think I'm on the board of Warriors Ethos. We're a transition program, and it's a program designed to follow you throughout your entire life. And we help with resume development. We help with LinkedIn. And we specialize in light, medium, and heavy lifts. A light lift would be possibly a submarine nuclear engineer who only needs a little bit of help with their resume, and they want a little bit of help on LinkedIn. And so they come to us, and they spend about 3 months with us, and we get it all prepared for them, and they interview, and we would consider them a light lift. Medium lift is somebody who is struggling, figuring out, like you were saying, what do I want to do when I transition? What in the world do I want to do? And so we provide more resources for that individual in terms of going down the path, trying to figure out what is important to them and what isn't important to them, building different resumes so that they can begin interviewing. Our goal is to get them in the right job the first time and not a job that is short term. And we're there for them even if it doesn't work out. So we try to place people in opportunities either through internship or through different forms of fellowships, and to see if it's a good match for them professionally. And if it is, then they can stay long term. If it isn't, then the employer and the veteran are an equal good feeling in terms of the separation. And then the heavy lift is for the severely wounded. We spend a tremendous amount of time with them. So that's the program, and I just feel like the main point is that there are resources out there for you if you are transitioning, and they're wonderful groups. And it is not the military or the United States' obligation to seek those groups out. It's the veteran themselves, because the help is there, and preparing is your obligation. And I think that may be a problem in terms of you're always mission-based, you're always team-based. Now you're going to be individually based, okay? And how do you individually prepare your family and yourself for this transition? And Adam would be there to help. Frank would be there to help and mentor. I would be there to help and mentor. You have tremendous resources. It's just looking for them and finding them. And that is what I would recommend in terms of resume preparation. You do have plenty of help there based on your need.
Right. Yeah, and I guess we can't always assume that the veteran is going to know what career they should get into. They know what they did in the military, but maybe they wonder, what should I be doing in the civilian world? So I'm sure they're going to need some help there, and that's where I guess mentorship comes in. One thing I also want to know is what kind of educational opportunities there are if they want to advance themselves and pick a.
So let me start, and I'm glad you asked that, Dan, because I was going to mention it before, but the DoD has created a policy called the Skill Bridge policy, right, which allows those service members that are transitioning the last 180 days of service to get additional education in the areas of credentialing, certifications, and licensing, right? So the services have vetted over 200 organizations. NS2 Services happens to be one of those, as a matter of fact, which is a certified, credentialing workforce development program for the military. And we're on some installations, but those are readily available. You can use your GeoDeal for some of them. Some are at no cost. They're usually 3 to 4 months in length, no greater than. Some are as small as 2 weeks, but you'll earn a credential. So from truck driving, earning a CDL, earning, a SAP Software Solutions credential from NS2 Serves or Microsoft Software Systems Academy. The list of them go on in various industries. But that is a way to continue to improve your resume, earn a credential, and hopefully segue that right into job placement.
Right. You touched on this a little bit. I did wonder, how to best play up one's strength as a veteran. How they can emphasize, their, the kind of experience that they got in the service in terms of advancing their career. What's the best way to do that? Is it talk about those soft skills? What are employers going to care about most?
Yeah. So what I always ask the employers when I'm advocating for our veterans is hopefully you find an HR talent acquisition manager that understands, military jargon, understands your resume. And by the way, we are improving on our resume writing. I mean, I'm on my third or fourth version now. I've taken out some of the jargon, myself, but we are improving in that. And so those hiring managers Frank alluded to are starting to understand it a little bit more, the language that we're putting in there. But I ask those hiring managers to just give the veteran, if they self-identify as a veteran, an opportunity for an interview. An opportunity for an interview, and let them have an opportunity to sit across the table, kind of like we're doing now, and explain who they are. Talk about their experiences, all right? Ask them questions. Some of their experiences of combat are like no other, all right? That they can do various things that will bring out the necessary skills that corporation is looking for, or even in training or the military skill set. For example, not everyone's looking for a sniper, right? But I would tell you that a sniper has incredible skills that almost every organization would want. It's not that single shot that has strategic implications, all those things tactically that lead up to it, right? The analytics, the logistics, the coordination, the ability to operate independently, right? Based on some strategic guidance. But that's an example, but there are countless examples of our service members and their skill set that they earned in the military that can really equate to what they can do in the civilian world.
Well, we could talk about this subject for a long time, but I really want to jump into healthcare, and particularly, Frank, if you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges you see in transitioning from military to civilian healthcare, some of the high-level challenges you've encountered with your own son.
So probably one of the predominant problems that still is challenging the system now is that there's a huge separation between military healthcare or defense health and the VA. There's a lot of efforts now trying to draw that into a closer, coordinated effort, but a lot of it is, comes back to, IT systems that don't talk well to each other, transfer of health records, HIPAA regulations that in some cases may represent an impediment for the transfer of information. And the reason I say this, I'm wearing a memorial bracelet here on my right wrist that represents the loss of my son, who was a legacy enlisted SEAL, 10 years of hard combat. He was a special operations medic, a corpsman, a SEAL sniper, and a breacher. And very decorated, as I said, top operator within the community, who suddenly went off the rails one day. Had no idea what was going on. Was seeking help within the military medical system. Subsequently, their assessment was, he's got some type of behavioral health, mental health issues going on. And next thing you know, we started seeing, prescription after prescription of drugs being prescribed for symptoms. And subsequently, he had to leave the service under honorable conditions, but certainly could no longer do his job as a SEAL. And through that process, the system trying to explain, what was going on to him, hung a lot of different labels onto him. And we encountered a lot of barriers to care. And in some cases, the system didn't know what it didn't know. He got into VA care, which was almost a cold start, because a lot of what happened in the military side really didn't crosswalk over to the VA side. Again, a system that was heavily encumbered by a thrust of veterans through almost 20 years of conflict, let alone, the Gulf War, Vietnam, and Korea veterans, and a system that was not prepared to deal with some of the veteran health issues. But again, they're working to improve that. The ultimate metric is, how does this help the veteran in the end? I will tell you that in my son's case, he struggled, really did not see any improvement in the 2 years we tried to rescue him. And one morning he took his life and became one of the veterans one Sunday morning, one of 22 who took their life because they had lost all hope and saw no way out. He had always said, something's wrong with my head. I don't know what it is. I don't know what happened to me. I'm broken up inside. He had previously indicated he wanted his body donated for TBI, traumatic brain injury research. He thought something, again, was wrong with his head. We were able to do that, and 3 months after his death, we learned that he had an undiagnosed severe level of brain injury at the microscopic level directly related to blast. And when you look back at his skill set, the fact that he was a sniper and explosives breacher, let alone being exposed in combat to IEDs, and certainly in a high fidelity training environment, you start, understanding the amount of exposure that he had and the damage that we ultimately saw post-mortem in his brain. It really highlighted the issue of invisible wounds. It's one thing that we see our veterans who are coming out and they have visible wounds, and you make an immediate connection. But there's a much larger population out there of folks with invisible wounds that have trained for combat, been in combat, or been exposed to explosive forces like artillery and so forth, that potentially could represent a high population of folks that could explain why some of these cases with PTSD, use disorder, moral injury, and so forth are difficult and complex. So a lot of research right now is going on. His story is inspired an executive order coming out of the president last March called Prevents. A lot of other initiatives are underway, again, to try to understand what's going on, to try to prevent injuries like this from occurring to our warriors who we've asked to go into harm's way to do some pretty difficult things. But this is part of our obligation to take care of these veterans. It has relationship to everything we've talked to today. And so it's a complex rubric. It's one that we have to look at holistically and address all the parts and pieces that are relevant to that person's needs.
Right. Thank you for that. And I wonder if you could sort of springboard off that and talk a little about, what that means for folks who are transitioning from military to the civilian world. How can they make sure they get that continuing care even after service?
So again, I think part of this is an obligation on that individual, provided that they can navigate those waters. And this is one of the difficult aspects of our veteran experiences as with my son. He wasn't necessarily, here's a guy that was a top operator, a tremendous planner, had very, very intelligent, but, once we got to the point of engaging, VA medical services, he couldn't organize himself through the day. He couldn't navigate those waters. So either myself, my wife, his girlfriend had to accompany him to his appointments, had to, help him through this regimen, which again, I would say is, we're surrounded by bureaucracy. And as one of my British colleagues told me, hey, we Brits may have invented bureaucracy, but we're just amazed what you Americans have done with it. So this is part of the calculus here. If you have somebody that has an invisible wound, let alone a visible wound, they're challenged by just getting up every day and getting through that day. And that's part of what factors into some of the veterans that we see are struggling Um, again, we have to respect that. We have to understand that. We have to develop programs that are customized for that individual so that we can get them to a better place. And again, in many cases, the system didn't know what it didn't know. Hopefully we're getting smarter. We're getting better connected, but we have a long way to go.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to just add on that is I've been working with the suicide prevention for the last 6 years, and I'm really focused in on what I said earlier, which was financial strength, professional esteem, and then also spiritual. And you cannot have spiritual strength without health. And so I really think that's really important to tie into that, because ultimately we have to be there for the people that come out that are maybe suffering from PTSD or brain trauma, and really give them the attention that they need in order to have that transition be successful, not only for the first year, but throughout their whole life. As we know, highest suicide rate is for Vietnam veterans globally. So why is that? Is that they're coming down at the end of their life. They don't have the strength they may have had in their youth in terms of getting over those spiritual questions. So we need to be there for everyone, regardless of their age, and really, really address that issue head on, and not have a stigma about it, and see it as what it is. And what I'm finding over the years is that every year, the people like Frank and others just making this issues so much stronger in the military community and as a major topic. We saw that at the Surgeon General at the Navy Safe Harbor Foundation luncheon, who talked directly about suicide, and that was the first time I've heard a flag officer really address it directly to a larger group. So we are making great strides, and we just need to be there for each and every individual and show that we care as they come out 100%. And I think Frank is a national figure on that, and we all should really thank him for his service, not only in the past, but in the present. So.
Yeah, and that's why I'll also jump on this, though, and say, it's not going to eliminate it, but finding meaningful employment for that service member or their spouse that is transitioning is a way to hopefully reduce it. It provides them a way to sustain their lifestyle, self-worth and dignity, a member of a team again. That's why this TAP and their reinvention of TAP is so important, because they treat it as a process, not an event. Work their way through the process, they're more likely to be successful on the right side of duty 214, so that they are employed almost immediately. And there's not a gap in that employment. So there is a sea of goodwill out there of corporations and companies that want to hire our vets. What we've got to do, things like we're doing today, is talking about how do we bring those two together? How do we bring that service member, right, who now has some resources available, has a process, all right, to connect them with those employers to hopefully continue to reduce some of the topic that we're talking about.
Right. It really is about communications and understanding, and folks developing relationships, that connective tissue that can help improve the conditions.
Well, we're coming close to time, but I'll go. I've got another question I'd like to ask about healthcare, and that's, what service members who are leaving military service and entering the civilian world need to understand about the differences between military healthcare and what you're going to see as far as civilian healthcare. What kind of things that they're going to maybe be surprised by if they don't know about it.
Well, I would say roll that one to Adam, since he is experienced that firsthand, and then I can put some icing on that.
I just say, as a retiree, afforded the opportunity to maintain my TRICARE. That was the one thing. So my wife and I decided we take a very good look at all the options out there, and we went with TRICARE Prime. That's not necessarily a plug, but they're great for us, and it covers our vision, our dental, and our health for me and my 5 other dependents that I have. So I'm a big fan of the TRICARE Prime. I'm also, though, a fan of the VA. I've entered the VA system most recently for some routine checkups, but I will put in a plug for the VA and say that it has overcome some of the challenges that we've all heard about. And my experience with the VA has been superb so far. From the minute I went in for my checkup to the immediate follow-up by their offices to the routine contact via text or email or even hard copy letters, by the way, to my contact at the local VA hospital and routine follow-ups on after that. The care has been superb for me so far, and so I have nothing but positive things to say about both the systems I have. It's a personal choice, though. The service member has to really do their due diligence and investigate what's best for their family. There is an aspect of copay that they have to pay. So back to the financial piece that David talked about, there is, of course, some things that are just not completely covered by even my TRICARE, but and you have to be willing to pay that or just be prepared to do that. But it has been, my experience so far has been pretty positive.
So there's nothing free in the world. That's why you gotta, even though somebody says that you may tell you it is, it's not. There's nothing free in the world. You have to be prepared. To Adam's point, and again, and I reflected on some of my VA experience and certainly military medicine experience. We are in a learning phase right now, and there's a lot of attention on this. And my sense is it's going in the right direction. Just like years ago, the world was flat until, all of a sudden it became round. And these are complex issues. And again, 20 years of war, let alone what we were dealing with, before the 20 years with our existing veterans population, has really put a lot of pressure on this system. And but the pressure, I think, in many ways has pushed it in a good direction. And we're seeing positive things come out. We're always going to have challenges, and medicine's always going to evolve. But you have to advocate for yourself or get somebody to help advocate for your health care. It's not trivial. It's all interconnected. You need to have a healthy body and a spiritual mind to go forward, to be able to reinvent yourself, to be able to benefit from these adventures that lie ahead in your life experience.
Right. Well, I think we made about halfway through my questions, so you can talk forever. But I did want to wrap up, and I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about Institute Serves and some of the work that they do, whichever.
Go ahead.
No, I'm gonna send it over to the program manager.
It's an honor to do it. Actually, there are a series of workforce development programs for one of them, but we specialize in SAP IT technology. And we take those post-9/11 veterans, Gold Star spouses. That's our unique space. Is there are a lot of organizations like Hiring Heroes that are doing spouses. We don't necessarily take the spouses, but we'll take those Gold Star spouses. As Frank alluded to before, those that have some stressors in their life, right? We take a hard look during our intake process and our review of their DD-214, their resume, and the paragraph or two that they've got a right to say why they deserve to go to a program like this. Because we're giving them an opportunity of a lifetime to go through a intensive 8 to 10 week course at a brick and mortar facility in Leesburg, Virginia, where we will graduate and certify them with a credential in SAP and work diligently hard to place them in corporate America somewhere. And we've been very successful so far. So this is no cost to the veteran. And it's very rewarding. We're honored to do it. There are others that do Microsoft, there are others that do Salesforce, but our niche is SAP.
Yeah, don't let the day that you sign your DD-214 be the day that you realize that you're unprepared to leave service.
Right. And one last question, Warriors Ethos?
Yeah, I did talk about Warriors Ethos earlier as a group that will help you, during your transition, whether you're a light, medium, or heavy lift, and get you where you want to be and work with you not only currently but throughout your entire life. And it was founded by a great sniper named Jared Shepard, and people like Flo Groberg are also on our board. So it's a very strong group, and I really encourage to look for the right fit for you, whether it's with Colonel Rocke or whether it's at Warriors Ethos. There's resources out there, and that's really why I wanted to bring all of us together and as a board member of AUSN and talk about transition and all the great programs out there for veterans and all the help to no matter where they are in their life in terms of their need. There are different verticals that we can help you with, and we're here to do that. So I just wanted to end or state that
And I'd also lastly, and on the plug, our next course for NS2 Serves is our core is in April. It's here in Leesburg, Virginia. There is space available. We're taking applications. The process is open. So if I could just ns2serves.org, the service members can go to there and they can apply, and we hope to see you in our course.
Okay. We'll provide a lot of these resources on the website, but yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I really appreciate you all coming by. I think this is a great discussion, and that's all that we had. So thank you, and this will be posted live on the video will be posted on the site later on.
Thanks to your audience.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
We didn't take